What's going on, everybody? Cody from Motorcycle MD. Today I'm going to bring you guys a video on a technique that I use for checking float levels on multiple carb systems. This is off of I believe it's a 77 750F, CB 750F Honda, as usual. And it can be kind of difficult, other than when they're in the bike, to check the float levels on all four, bench testing them per se. There's many videos out there. A great one is from Shane Conley over at How To Wrench on just bench setting them up to let them sit with a gravity-fed fuel line on them to check the float. Make sure they're not leaking. Make sure the seats are clean and the float's fine and all that good stuff. There's also one I've seen on many different places where people use clear line and run them off the carbs and route them up and check the levels across. It's a bunch to read. So I'm going to strap these things up and check the float levels individually while applying fuel to all four at the same time and being able to only check one. It's pretty cool. I don't know how to, these things are so awkward. Just hold it like a baby. But before we get started and we go any further, make sure you join the mailing list. I have a free troubleshooting cheat sheet that I made for you, just for you. Breaking down a bunch of different topics about the motorcycle, things that I've run into in the industry, common problems, common misconceptions, and really just helps you diagnose problems efficiently, quickly, and hopefully get that bike back on the road. It's free. Check it out. Couple things you will want to grab to be able to do this. Fuel line, big rubber band, two of them actually, gloves, so the cut that you did on your finger does not sting from putting gas on it, float level gauge, which I have in the description below for you to pick up, and gas. It also helps to kind of have two people help you out with this in case you don't have like a bench hold or whatever, some kind of vise to hold the carbs. It can be kind of tricky balancing a bunch of things all at once, but let's hop into it. So first off, what the heck is checking float level? Float level is determining how much gas is allowed to enter into the bowl until a valve shuts it off. Okay, you don't want obviously too much gas going into the bowl because it can overflow. It can go into the cylinders, fill the airbox, drain into the crankcase, and cause all kinds of crazy issues. And in some cases, it can definitely change the way the bike runs. Now, the idea, which I've shown in another video, is you have a bowl that sits on the bottom of your carburetor. This floats, believe it or not. Sometimes, unless it's brass and it fills up with gas, be sure to check those ones out. But attached to this, if you've already cleaned the carbs, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, but there's a needle that sits in between here. Now, these ones are actually adjustable. Those metal tangs that you see allow you to adjust them. If you have a full plastic float, obviously it's not adjustable. Do not try melting it. Do not try to make your own fix. You're more likely to just screw it up even more. But obviously we know that these solid plastic floats will float. What we're checking is to make sure that the seal between the float needle and the needle seat are making a good seal. There's an array of different float needles out there. Some are metal tipped, some are rubber tipped, different things to look for. Obviously, if it's very corroded, you want to replace it. You want to make sure that the sides of that float needle are also clean. Some of them have a little bounce tit on the top with a spring underneath it that you can't see, but allows it to maneuver and bounce under certain situations when you're going over bumps or whatever. On the rubber tip style, I can tell you that what you're looking for is for the camera to be recording. Great. There's a little ring around the very tip of it. Over time, use, and if it's leaking, it's more than likely because of that issue. But I would say even more crucial than that is the seat that it seals inside of, which is actually pressed and mated inside of the body of your carburetor set. It's not removable unless it is removable. Because in some cases, there's like a little 10mm that you can use, a little crush washer on like 1100 and 750s and that kind of stuff. But these ones are pressed in. Most of them are. Okay. Different ways to polish those up. Might even have to explain it to you. That might be helpful. Yeah, I'll probably just cut in a cool video of me cleaning up some float seats. Is take a piece of steel wool, alright, and just break a piece off. I would twist it up into like a little bullet and run it straight down inside. Just like that. And if you want, you can just take it and just spin it All you're trying to do is just polish the sides. You're not trying to score it up or anything, and then blow it out with air. What I also do is take a Q-tip with some polishing compound, like what you use for a car when you're polishing it. Dip the Q-tip in that and just hone out that seat. It can get really, really clean like that as well. Make sure you get all the junk and gunk out from on the sides of the polishing compound. I just stole that from one of the clips of the carburetor videos that I have inside of the membership. Be sure to check that out. Now, I feel personally the best way to check float level is with a gauge. Okay, many will say otherwise, and I'm sure that way works. My way is not the gospel, it's just the way that I do it and the way that I recommend. Same with the technique that I use here. Okay, so what I've shown in another video, which I'm just going to briefly touch on right now, is when you're checking float height, the goal is to rock the carburetor back until the float lightly sits. Okay, we're not checking it with the float down like this, we're just checking it where in its resting position. So right on the brink of when it breaks off of the float seat and when it touches back down, and knowing the spec, which for these ones are 14.5 millimeters, I can adjust this to where it needs to be, and with the float sitting where it should be, I can just slightly press down to see, am I moving the float? Is the float too high? Is it not touching it at all? What I like to set mine at is just a little bit of spring tension on my gauge. So this is actually where I'd like it to be. Just a little bit of tension on the float needle itself and back off. I don't like it to be flush like this, and we'll see why. The goal here is obviously to shut off the valves for the ones that you're not checking, right? Because if I just apply gas here, it's all going to come rushing out of all four. I want to check this one and then close that one off, check this one, and the way that I do that is with rubber bands. What I want to point out here is the goal is not to mash this float down as hard as I can to shut the valve off. It shouldn't need that. And if you actually mash them down too hard, you may even change the float level as the one that you're mashing down. So what I do is just very lightly, I'll just take a rubber band, do something like this. I'll just use it on 2 because that's the least amount of pressure, and it's kind of holding those floats up, and I can just wrap this just like that. The floats are being held in, not by tons of pressure, but enough that I like, that no fuel should flow out of that one. I'll do the same thing with this one. Wrap around the main jet, maybe wrap it up top of here. Nothing crazy, just enough to allow it to sit there closed. So with all 3 of these closed, I can now bench test this one. Like I said, sometimes it's nice to have a friend help you out, your wife, your partner, the one you love, the one you hate, whoever. That way they can either apply pressure here with the fuel and hold the bottle for you, or you can hold them up. I'm just going to set them up into a bench vise. So I want to try to do this the cleanest way possible. I don't really need to clamp down on them that much at all. If anything, I like to just rest them up on there. Just like that. It's perfect. Alright, so obviously I'm going to add fuel. I'm going to put the fuel bottle onto the hose, and then I'm going to just take my float level gauge and rest it up where how I would normally check it. But this time, there'll be fuel pressure behind it. Okay, so first what I'm going to do is make sure that fuel does flow out. What do you know? It does. Awesome. Okay, and with my gauge set to 14.5, ready my bottle, I can take my float level gauge, shut that valve off, hopefully, and apply fuel. I can put a little pressure behind it by squeezing the bottle to see if anything comes out. Let's see if anything's going to flow if I pull it off a little bit. It sure does. So I'm going to shut it back off again, and I'm just kind of checking to see how far off do I have to come until fuel comes out. The smallest amount possible is the closest that you're going to get to that measurement. That's pretty good. There's no slow drips dripping out afterwards or nothing. I would say that one is absolutely perfect. Alright, so moving on to number 2. Clamp them down, just put a little bit of pressure on there. I don't want a lot because there's no real nice way of grabbing these things. Rubber band should hold it shut. Double check that it is flowing out of that one. Float level gauge. See what this one does. See, this was the one that was just perfectly flush. It was just sitting right on top of it when it was in the resting position. And with my float level gauge holding 14.5, it leaks like a sieve. Okay, So what we need to do is adjust that tang downward, or the way you're looking at it, upward, but down to raise that float off. Again, the goal is to try to get it just to get that little bit of bounce or pressure from that springed little tit on the float needle and call it done. I could do this down the whole line. That's how I individually check each float to see if it is leaking. Even a small drip is not a good thing. What you want is that specification for this one, 14.5, with a little bit of spring pressure behind it. I feel like is what works best. If it does not seal off of that, either you have not polished the seat up nice enough, or it's time to replace that float needle. Okay, one other thing that you can check, if all else fails, check with a magnifying glass inside of that float's needle seat. Okay, sometimes you can see corrosion that builds up around there. Moisture gets into the gas, the bike sits for 30 years, and then it corrodes that brass that's there. Be sure to grab that troubleshooting cheat sheet before you go. Tons of great information in there. I hope this is helpful for you guys. While you're checking out motorcyclemd.com, check over the store. I got some cool shirts over there I want you guys to see. Until next time, Cody from Motorcycle MD, bring you guys quality tips and tricks for your next build or your daily rider. Pan out.